Oh, hey, my friends. This is Word Made Digital Season 2. It's awesome to be back with you. We're in the swing of things, bringing you a whole new season, 15 episodes between now and the end of June. I've heard from a bunch of you that you were posting about last week's episode, or you were listening to the episode with Lisa Bevere. Hey, thanks so much. I always love it when you post about it or you want to share it with your friends so that they can find Word Made Digital too. Today on Season 2, Episode 2, we have a company called Colors and Shapes. And we're interviewing its principals, Gordie, Cochran, and Andy Diehl. Colors and Shapes is a creative company, and they make events and production come to life. They've created event experiences for people like Bethel Music and TED Talks, Ford, the car company, World Vision, Oakley, and Alpha. So we dive into their creative process for production and doing visual experiences and designs that really inspire and connect with real people. So before we dive into that conversation about how to make live events pop, I also want to thank our Season 2 sponsor. It's my alma mater, Wycliffe College. Wycliffe is, if you don't know, it's an evangelical graduate school of theology at the University of Toronto. And Wycliffe offers really affordable and flexible theological education. So whether it's full-time, part-time, online, it's got it all. And actually the reason I chose Wycliffe, it was a long list of reasons, but I wanted that rigorous academic experience that they offered. I liked that it was still a quote-unquote evangelical approach to theology, but it came from this Anglican tradition, and so it would grow me and stretch me and give me some new perspectives, because I don't personally come from an Anglican background, and so I liked that I would be learning with people of diverse backgrounds within evangelicalism. Also, it's really internationally recognized as a school in academic circles, and that was really important to me. I wanted a degree that would have some international weight to it. So if I were ever to go to another place in the world, I could bring my degree with me, and it would mean something. And that's partly because the degrees are conjointly offered or awarded with the University of Toronto. And so you get the Wycliffe College degree and you get a University of Toronto degree, and it's one of the world's top universities. So I love this school. I'm going to talk about it a little more all through this season, but I love this gorgeous campus that it's on. This is a historic campus right in the heart of Toronto, the biggest city in Canada. It's just this amazing sort of sanctuary in a huge urban center. And yeah, there's just so much more I can say about Wycliffe, but you can read more about my experience at Wycliffe and how they really helped in my own spiritual formation. You can go to wycliffecollege.ca/wordmadedigital. They published a special interview there just for you guys, listeners of this podcast, and you can check out sort of what that school was like for me and why I think you should consider it for yourself if you're looking at theological education. All right, that's all for now. Let's go right to the interview with Colors and Shapes.
Welcome to the Word Made Digital podcast with Joanna LaFleur. You're listening to Season 2, sponsored by Wycliffe College. Word Made Digital brings you interviews with brilliant Christian creatives and communicators to inspire, challenge, and equip you in your own work. The church carries the best news in the world, so we want to help you be the best creatives and communicators in the world. Here we go.
Well, hey, Gordie and Anthony, thanks so much for being on Word Made Digital. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, happy to be here.
We, as we were just saying before we hit record, we originally ran into each other. We knew a lot of the same people, but we met officially in New York City when you guys were producing an event called Movement Day. And so I'd love to talk to you today around creativity and production and live events and where some of the stories you have or the context of what you've been doing, but then also, of course, people want to know, like, where is that going? What are you excited about in terms of creativity, style, production, technology that's happening? So before we get into all that, who are you guys? Can you explain how you work together?
Totally. So we are a partnership and we run a company called Colors and Shapes. Colors and Shapes exists to create powerful experiences that matter. It bleeds into several areas. Live events is definitely one where we're really passionate about it and we're involved in that a lot. But we also build and create experiences in the context of like permanent installations or public art, things like that. And then we also create content for experiences. So we'll Bethel and others around creating content for screens and live production, that kind of thing. So we really kind of live in a few different pools, but we really are focused on, I think, creating compelling, powerful live experiences for people that really do matter.
And how did you guys then connect with each other on that? Have you guys known each other for years, or where did the business, yeah, what's the origin story?
We started in the garage. So the origin story is Gordie's got a long background in kind of music industry and events and creative stuff, and we actually knew each other in college. Mm-hmm. So we kind of had we knew each other from college, and Gordie had gone on to do his stuff and was in Starfield for a while and was producing things. I had got into the world of more technical and creative stuff, working in ad agencies, and started doing some kind of projection mapping and some kind of cool visual technique stuff. Opportunity to produce some events together, and Gordie called me up and he's like, "Oh, wouldn't it be cool if we?" Mm-hmm. And it literally just sounded like a fun opportunity to build something.
It was literally the Covenant Awards in 2011.
Yeah.
And that was our first thing that we actually did together. Yeah.
And it was literally just like, it was super fun. Mm-hmm. And there was right away, there was kind of this sense of like, that was fun, but more than it just being fun, there was like this sense of how much we had this canvas to kind of craft an experience for people. So we had another event we did later, like when was Justice Conference?
2012.
Yeah, so the next year we had another opportunity to do an event down in Portland with an event called the Justice Conference. And I think that was the one that kind of sealed the deal for us, where we kind of went, we could, like, there's such a need in the space of where you want to create a really powerful experience for people. You have a really powerful message, or you brand with people. The world that is built out to support that is so built on these flattening best practices of like package A or production package B, or would you like the super custom production package C? You know, and it's usually just means like you want purple squares or green circles, or you know, and it's so like, and it's all that world, the economic diving into it they're built on basically getting really good at doing the same thing over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. And we just realized how honestly it was. You can go to an incredible event. I'm sure you have experience like that. You've had an experience where maybe it was a conference, maybe it was some event, maybe it was a conference. About that, and yet what you remember tends to be very, very specific and like it's like a moment. It's like there's that one moment in that one song where there's that one way that person said this thing, experience that we had when we were all together, and you never forget it. And it literally, it's like it's in your bones.
So do you have one of those? I'm curious. We were just talking about this in the creative office that I work in yesterday. Like, what was your first concert or conference, or like, do you have an event that maybe from your childhood or teen years that like sticks out in your mind for that?
I know from in the Delirious concert as a 16-year-old, and then also more recently, launched their Xylo bands. And you essentially the lights go down and everybody lights up. I think that was something I'll never forget. And it's fine. I mean, that sold out. I mean, it's now common. Like if you're doing a stadium tour or most arena tours, like you have to introduce that kind of technology almost.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was for me. That was mine.
Yeah. Gosh, I don't even know what I would say. So I was very limited in exposure to like
Rhythm and News.
Yeah. Rhythm and News come through town. Yeah. I mean, honestly,
Hootie and the Blowfish, right?
I think the beauty of it is it's not something that like it's human. It's honestly, it's Christmas morning. It's going over to like it's Sunday dinner. Like it's walking in the room and the table's set. It's, you know, it's so fundamental. It's like it's finding a really beautiful space and creation where you've been down and you find some area that you've never seen that before, and you kind of walk into it and it all kind of hits you and you go, wow. So I think it's more like the recognition of that's what event. And I think the interesting thing is there's been a lot of like research around this that came out recently. There's more kind of like research and data around this now where we know that those high points, actually, it's not just an anecdotal thing. We know for a fact that those do actually impact people qualitatively and quantitatively more than just like a big 8 out of 10 experience. Like it's those 10 out of 10 moments that could literally be 5 seconds long. So we wanted to create those and figure out how to get really good at doing that. So
we literally were on the train coming back from Portland and together, and we're kind of like, I think we should do this. Like actually go for it. And at that point, you were working at an agency, and I was running more of a graphic design studio, and sort of realizing that my experience being on the road and in music, I actually loved production design and kind of crafting that experience more than I did playing the music itself almost. So it felt like this natural fluid thing where Anthony's creative and technical ability and my experience I could bring to the table were like, well, we should really, I think, take a run at this. And so that we essentially, I think, formally started in 2012 on a train in Oregon.
Yeah. So you had this skill set and you realized you could use it to make amazing experiences for people and work together to do that. But why did you choose to focus a lot of your work in the Christian sphere as opposed to like just general production?
Yeah. So I think that there's sort of two answers to that. One would be we do quite a bit in both. It's not that we are a Christian design company. A lot of the opportunities that we've kind of jumped into in the church and kind of faith-based world, a lot of it because for us, like, goes back to like powerful experiences, and that those two words really, I think, capture the sense of like things that I'm passionate about. And so there's a lot of the things that we say yes to is primarily just based on conviction and on the fact that we feel like it's an opportunity that we want to give our best energy to. But we also like do a lot of work outside of that space. Right now we're working with TED. We've been working with TED for a number of years and really been fortunate to be able to partner with them pretty deeply on crafting their whole stage experience, production design, all of that, and then all of the content that really supports the event, all of these kind of visual worlds that create the backdrop for all these talks that literally have such a massive impact around the world. And so that's been a really cool opportunity. But for us, it falls right back in line with that value of like, this matters. Like whether Chris Anderson shares the same belief system as we do, it's like we're really passionate about, I think, partnering with people that have a really strong why and are really pursuing something like that. So,
and talk to me about the TED stuff. What do you do? And people would probably be familiar with TED. It's TED Talks. It's these short people giving expert talks for a very timed, short amount of time, 5 minutes, or up to maybe 18 or 20 minutes.
20, yeah.
What do you do with them? What's your part of that?
So the TED conference. I mean, sometimes it's a little bit. So there's people know of TED Talks. There's TEDx Talks, which are community organized events. The TED sort of like one of the, kind of like premier, kind of got to be at it sort of events in terms of conferences out in the world still.
Internally, they call it Big TED. So there's like TED Global, there's TED Summit, TEDx that are,
Okay.
But Big TED is the one.
Big TED.
Yeah.
When they moved up to Vancouver in 2013, I believe.
Yeah.
So they made the decision to move it up here. We had the opportunity to support them on some technical design stuff, and that just continued to morph year after year into being more involved with creative. And so we're doing quite a bit with them now on that side. And it's been a great relationship. They're an amazing client, very, very ambitious in what they want to do. So we really support them in building out environments. So when you see TED Talks that are filmed at the TED conference, you're looking at staged looks and graphics and all that kind of stuff that have largely all been designed by CNS. So yeah.
Oh, cool. Very cool. So yeah, we have seen if people didn't realize it, they've probably seen your work because they've caught a YouTube video clip from TED, a big TED Talk.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're involved in those projects.
Yeah.
So like you're in this world every day, and some of us, we live in this world a little bit, people who are listening to this podcast, like we maybe have involvement at the table, but we're not sort of the expert, of course, in the world of production of these live events and these, sort of artistic experiences. What are you seeing develop? I want to go later into like what's some stuff that's driving you crazy, or like, can we please all stop doing that thing? But what is some stuff that you're seeing in general as like style direction? Like if like Pantone every year comes out with like their color of the year. So in production land, like what are you seeing what's your color of the year?
LED strips. No. I think like the big, increasing amount of value and desire placed on experience for people. So people they have the world in their pocket. We all are sucked into this digital addiction we're all trying to fight against. And I think that like being in the room with other human beings and experiencing something, that it feels like it's only becoming increasingly more like, oh man, I need that. Because there's this void now that's kind of being created where we're not putting ourselves into those moments as much anymore. And so the music industry, like Spotify and streaming and Napster and like the complete reconfiguration of music, like people make money on the road, and it's only increasingly so in that the demand is there because people want to actually tap into that experience. So I think that like that's just sort of speak to the general, I think the demand and the context for live production. I think that people want to experience things, and I think that's only going to grow. As far as trends, it's funny, we get asked questions all the time. It's like, oh, you guys are the projection mapping guys, or you're the what's cool, what's coming down the pipe. And for us, like, yeah, we're always generally aware of like, I think the technology that's emerging, and Anthony's always you've kind of always been at the forefront of that as far as like understanding what's coming and whatnot. But we actually sort of say that we're, agnostic when it comes to like tool X or tool Y. And I think that like, I would say that we probably get more excited around like the bigger questions, and then we start applying the production trends or tools that may be out there at that moment in time to apply it to sort of a bigger idea. And as opposed to leading with sort of a trend first and then applying a trend to a client or something like that. So I think that like, to answer your question, I still haven't really answered it. Trends that are, I think that I think accessibility, like I think across the board with technology, like the things you can do with an office projector and a laptop and a piece of mesh or just some lights from Longa McQuaid here in Canada or whatever. There's a lot of teenagers that are like, I sound so old, incredible music on their laptops and blowing and like both in music creation but also just in like software development. And so I think that the trend is just like, I think accessibility is that much more like to innovate and to create something new.
The bar for entry is so low now.
It's so low. So
I'll give you one trend, and just to build on what you said, Gordie. So I think that like the idea that Gordie said, that experience, it's almost like a supply and demand thing where our experience now in terms of what's projected out into the world is now digital, and content is all this kind of like streamed digital online kind of experience in one version or another. Real in the room, put your phone away and just, all those kind of experiences are incredibly powerful. just think as a wider angle on just some of those trends, just in terms of what's happening in the world of production design that we're always trying to understand and see where it's going, is the best production design in the world has a very strong why, and it's very concept driven. There was a time when you could drive down, you could drive across North America and you drive past hotel and motel after motel that would have a sign out front that said, color TVs, right?
Yeah, or air conditioning.
Air conditioning.
Yeah.
And that happens in every field, in every industry and whatever. The fact that you have an LED wall, the fact that you are using whatever tool, even 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we can look at examples of things where people would say that was incredible. And now we look at it and we go, it really didn't have a lot of substance to it, did it? It really was just kind of the first time it was just color TV when that was a new thing. And so the best production design in the world, from people like, we would say people like Ez Devlin and Michael Cochran's, am I saying his name right? Cochran's, who did the Oscars just recently, just a couple days ago, a designer for Hamilton. There's an incredible amount of thoughtfulness put into the design. There's almost more of a sculptural quality to it. It doesn't have to be super hit the nail, like super on the nose in terms of this equals that, this represents that. But the process that's going into thinking of why is it done this way and what are we drawing people into is becoming incredibly more refined because there's a maturity in this space, right? So
yeah, interesting. Well, something that I'm picking up on what you're saying that I hadn't thought about from the perspective of the guys who do live events is I'm hearing you talk about competition with people's phones. Like there are people in the rooms, these live events, and you're trying to pull them away from looking at this tiny little screen in front of them to the big thing that is happening in front of them live.
Exactly. And we even toyed around with this idea. We were talking about, like, I think there's been some artists that have finding ways to actually get people to put their phones away. But even the idea of putting on some kind of event where you literally check your phone at the door and you can't share it. You have to actually just be in the moment and experience it and then walk away. All you have is what's up in your head.
You can't take pictures.
You can't take pictures of it. And I think feels like that's infringing on my freedoms. We're just no. It's on me to, this is, and literally this phone is an extension of my personhood. But I think that there's something really powerful about that I think really strikes at the core of that people's experience is generally through the lens of their sort of digital, the thing in their hand.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you have experience with events that have done that in any success? Because whether it's a church service or it's a concert or whatever, the classic thing, I can think of a time where I was in a room where in a worship concert, and the worship leader actually told everyone, put down your phones, we're here to they stopped the worship and said, put down your phones, we're not here for a show, we're here for worship. But have you had any success? You have any tips for people on how to get people's phones to be the thing they're that isn't to compel people to the stage and away from their stupid phones?
It's really, I would say not roaring successes. We will continue to hear that. So phones, this is my side soapbox here, but phones and the way that we use connectivity, particularly with kids and adolescents, but for everybody at every stage, is I really believe right now this is the point where your parents tell you the story of taking you home, or taking your grandma saying, "Oh, I took your mom home from the hospital and she sat on my lap," and you're like, "Wait, she wasn't in a car seat?" Seatbelt? And they're like, "Yeah, that was just normal back then." And now we look back in shock and we're like, "What?" And it was just normal, right? So we have a normal right now that I 100% believe. And not just coming from the church or coming from Christians, I think from everywhere in society, we're going to learn of how much we're losing and how much, I'd say in the church, we would have a lens of what's happening to us in formation. But just psychology and everything, what's happening in the way we're experiencing stuff. I would say examples. Most of the examples are hilarious failures where people get up on stage. I can't remember who it was. I want to say it was like The Weeknd, or it was some show that I remember reading about. Yeah, where somebody's basically like I'm not going to do this song until you put your phones away, or something to that effect. And basically the crowd wins. Like, they basically don't give in.
Yeah.
And it's kind of just like a huge buzzkill, and it's really sad.
It's awkward. Yeah.
I would say, like, some of the events we've been part of, I know Ted does this, like, they're sort of coming in, there's sort of an expectation that to be part of a community, you need to, there's going to be, like, put your phone away and be in the moment, and that's why this is special, and that's why you need to be here. Mm-hmm. And most events, and particularly in the church, and maybe this is going to segue us into other things where we talk about what could be done better, but most events, and particularly in the church, tend to be all about how can we get people using their devices more. Like, everybody, stop what you're doing, and hashtag right now, and it's like, that is the measure of success. And that's easy to measure, but there's so much more power in having people just experience stuff in the moment and know that
being present.
Back. So
So I mean, we're kind of talking about that already, but let's move away from phones and just in general when you're thinking about creative events and production, particularly in the Christian sphere, because people listening to this podcast are predominantly Christian people. What is some stuff that drives you crazy? Or are you just like, oh, would we all stop? Like that stuff that we're all so tired of seeing. And maybe you're a little snobby about it because you've been this is your whole business. But what's some stuff that drives you crazy in Christian production?
I mean, some strong words. I don't know. Drives us crazy, but I would say, like things that we find, patterns that we see. I would say one of the biggest challenges, and I'm just kind of thinking about this a lot lately, of just like the incredible value of vulnerability and authenticity in everyday life, both in relationship, in your career, in your family, and for us in design and creating experiences that I think that as especially not to keep harping on the phones, but I think that the ability to truly be vulnerable and ask yourself truly authentically where am I at and who am I? I think that you apply that thinking to a community, a faith community or an event or a faith community event, whatever. I think that there's something incredibly powerful about being able to do that and then create out of that space, as opposed to going on Pinterest or your favorite website and sort of looking at what other people are doing that are cool, and essentially just imitation based on your the limited resources that you have to sort of try to get it as close as you can to look like Hillsong or whatever.
Yeah.
I think that there's people that are pioneering really great things in the Christian space, like the Hillsongs and the Bethels and other creatives that we've worked with Passion and Bethel and have a ton of respect for the work that they're doing and feel like they're actually authentically they're doing that, they're working from a position of this is who we are, and really trying to constantly be pushing themselves to innovate. But I think that it's frustrating when it just becomes about, I think, trying to emulate something and you're forsaking the beautiful and real and authentic things that are happening within your local context, and then doing the hard work and the process of really trying to figure out how do we bring that to life and in creative and compelling ways. And so, and Anthony can talk about design process better than I can, but really it's about identifying vulnerability and authenticity around who you are and what you're trying to accomplish, and then doing the real hard work of actual design process of iteration and working through it to get it to a place where it works, as opposed to I know if I can do this in this amount of time with this amount of money, it gets me a 7 out of 10 every time, so I'm just going to do that, as opposed to the hard work of actually iteration. And that requires increased vulnerability to sort of say, hey,
and time.
And absolutely.
And maybe not so much money. I mean, a lot of people say, oh, it'd be nice to do that if I had a lot of money. Easy for you guys to say if you have big budgets. But what I'm hearing you to say more is actually it's less about how much money you spend. It's more about how much time you spend reiterating and building and tweaking a creative idea towards something new.
And I think there's a cost that's way more than money, and the cost of just like saying, hey, this might be a really terrible idea, but I'm willing to like put it on the table and like, you know, explore it and do that again and do that again and do that again. And it's not sort of being held captive by my insecurity to say like, well, I don't want people to reject this, so I'm just going to play it safe. Like, I think that you got to take risks, and to take risks costs you something. And I think that like for us, it feels like, and we've wrestled through this over the years, where I think that Anthony's really, I think, helped push us towards this process of having a holistic approach and really leaning into design thinking, which is so, like, it's being more widely accepted and adopted in multiple disciplines, not just stage production design or graphic design. It's like just the whole design thinking is just so integral to, I think, like, I think doing work that really lasts and work that really you can really stand behind.
Yeah.
Like I would say, and just for creatives in the church that are serving the church, whether in a volunteer lay capacity or in staff roles, like, we need to be committed to becoming lifelong students of good design. And so I would say, if you like, what is good design? Where do I start with good design?
Yeah.
The cornerstone of design is empathy. So that's a foundational idea that I think is being teased out quite a bit, and probably a lot of the best literature on design, the study on design, kind of synthesizing ideas on design that's been coming out in the last like 10 years. But I think what's beautiful about that idea of empathy as a cornerstone of design for Christians and for the church is to, what Gordie's saying is to stop and say, who is this for, and why are we doing that? You know, why are we doing this? The question, you made the comment about, you know, that takes, you know, time, resources. I really believe at this point, and it feels, believe that adage of like fastest comes to design, when it comes to, I mean, so many areas of life that is true. But to slow down and ask the hard question for us is, and you know, I've never been in a staff role in the church. I've sort of, you know, always kind of served the church in these areas, but never been in the weekly grind or, you know, whatever might be in. But the reality is, we go, you know, in 2 weeks I have to ship this, or I have to have a stage that looks like this, or I have to have a graphic package that looks like this. And time to sit down and work on that, you have essentially two big choices. You can stare at a blank sheet of paper or a blank Photoshop document or whatever your medium is, or you can open up Pinterest, or you can open up, you know, whatever web go to that basically of somebody else that you can basically copy and paste and go, this could work. And you, instead of it being green, you make it blue, or instead of it being small, you make it big, or whatever.
Yeah.
And that is such a thing at this point that I think it's almost to the point where I think a lot of creators in the church think that that's what it means to serve the church with design, with creativity, is to essentially just scour Instagram and Pinterest for cool ideas all day long, right? Instead of the work of saying, the room, like, what are we trying to do? How do I communicate a big deal?
It's like, you know, having done branding work and graphics, kind of classical, part-time for a church here in Vancouver for helping run the communications department. And just like, I can speak to like you just got to ship. Like, you just got to be, it has to be above this level. And really, 6 out of 10 is, but you don't really have the ability or capacity to necessarily go there all the time. But I think what we're saying, a rhythm into your process where you're saying, to sit and look at a blank piece of paper and hold is scary, because it might take a long time. It might take 5 minutes, it might take 5 hours before the is cool. Getting to the finish line, like, I think like Anthony's saying, like, start slow like that And you may find that like once you're actually in Adobe whatever, building it out, you've done the work to sort of build the root concept that answers that why question, and is really from a position of empathy. And the execution sometimes is pretty fluid because you've really kind of wrestled through that. We still, to things like we curate on our own as well, but it's about where does that fit in the process, and it's about like where do those little pieces of inspiration. I think it's really about like clearing the table and starting clean, and then allowing it, and you build on that.
Yeah. I love this conversation, but just for the sake of time, I want to dive into one last thing as an illustration of some work that you guys have been doing. Maybe all the stuff that we've just been talking about with creativity can come into play with this illustration, particularly the Alpha film series. I'm bringing this one up because it's a huge project that was filmed all over the world, and it's used to try and help explain what Christianity is like and open up conversations about Christianity to all kinds of people who are maybe not even at all interested in faith, and yet people are becoming Christians through this content. So there's the context for this Alpha series. It's used all over the world in all kinds of languages. But can we talk a little bit before we go about the creative process of that? How did you think of that? You were rebuilding something that already existed, but it was really like old-fashioned, outdated. So how did you build that series?
Yeah, I would just say full transparency. I think we played a part of a bigger team on the film series. Where that whole but for that to happen back in 2012, there's a here in Canada who had this idea to essentially remake. There's a series called Phil Can made back in the 90s that was like this teaching video series that was really influential to Jason and I think just to youth across Canada. It was just a sort of like a big question. Sort of felt like there was this opportunity to reinterpret that model and apply it to the Alpha course, because it was really the Alpha course stage, and it had reached millions of people, but it was like it had been the same product year over year. To kind of try a different take on that. And so we built the first youth film series, fully independent from Alpha International, just basically Alpha Canada. And a good friend of ours, Dan Stewart, really directed and I think cast the vision for that, and really just tried to support producing that alongside the visual aesthetic, all of the graphic and the organizational realities of that happened, and it caught fire in Canada. And then Nikki Gumbel and the team over in the U. This is something we should really look at doing. This not just something for the broader church. And so that kind of dovetailed into Alpha Global saying, let's do it. They brought in a couple of people from Canada, one producer. We also produced. Dan also directed and graphics and all of the a lot of the visual components that played out in that series. Really spearheaded that. And then that, I think, has become a tool for churches. And it's really, I think to me, it's just sort of saying, like, it kind of goes back to the who and trying to communicate in a way that's authentic and compelling. And I think that the Alpha film series is not the coolest thing in the world. And we wrestled through that with we want to reach the, our host should be this 24, think about like MTV and whatever, like trying to create this vibe to this thing. But it's like, no, this is Nikki Gumbel's thing that he's really championed for 25 years. And it's something that he really is the voice. So he actually +% of the series, and but it works. He's not young. He wouldn't call himself a young hip whatever, but it was pretty powerful. And in his own way, I think he is pretty hip, because he's just unapologetically who he is, and that is just And there's they're hosts and presenters or whatever, but like, I think that to me, that was a great example of something where you got to make 1,000 creative decisions in a project like that, but really the big decision of just saying like, what is this content really? Like authentically, like what is the right voice and how does this need to be communicated? And I think for me and for us, I think that just feels like it just really solidifies that whole perspective of like starting with why and really building off of that cornerstone event I talk to and why are we doing this? Decisions that flow out from there. Mm-hmm. We find that they're generally the right decision, as opposed to trying to get too far ahead with something that feels really cool that we can all get excited about, but we're kind of missing the point.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Well, and that's it. Like having the art or the production serve the bigger picture and serve the vision rather than trying to have this creative idea or, as you said, like a trend of today and then cramming this event or this message into something just to make, for the sake of it being cool and trendy, but they didn't actually fit together.
Just like, I think the rate of change, like just is evolving and accelerating with technology, with social trends, norms that are happening in different corners of the world. And all that to say is like, whatever work you put out there, it's going to become dated that much quicker. Like, it's just like things move so quickly and puts the pressure on, whether it's a film series or an event or a visual or is this going to last? Like, does this feel like the moment right now? And we actually wrestled through this. We're working with Worship Central in Vancouver. And I had this design. I was so like, I flushed the whole thing out in my head. We talked with the team. We kind of modeled it up. Like, it just didn't felt like. There's several reasons why it just felt like I think we're trying too hard, or it's just not the right fit. And I think it was a great, a singular idea that necessarily needed to actually get kind of put. The process of like saying, no, is this the thing? And we, literally ended on something that feels like a much better fit and actually probably a lot more timeless and practicing a lot more restraint. Still give us tools to create a powerful experience for people, but like be like the coolest like thing that you've ever seen. That event far better than the big cool thing that, that I saw on Instagram that I thought would be cool. So we practice what we preach internally and really kind of like have to really kind of creativity against like, well, does this work? And how does it fit into the process? Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Well, guys, as just a last thing, if you wanted to, there's been like a lot of really good content in here that's very practical for people. And I think there's some stuff that people who are working in creativity are going to need to listen to again, like particularly this big idea around empathy. How do we use empathy as the foundation of what we're trying to build to create and experiences for people? But just like if you were going to encourage people, maybe it's something practical that people need to check out or try as an exercise for themselves, or just like to those, those people who are listening who are in the creative process and feel like there's always more deadlines than there is time and money. What would you say to those people today?
I would say that I don't know why it just came to mind, because this has been such a powerful thing, and this is going to sound very, very simple. But this on your next creative project, maybe you've already, but on the next one, starting next week or whatever, set a goal for yourself to not look at any references on Pinterest, on Instagram, and start by use a medium that feels comfortable to you. So for some people, it's going to be typing up words. It's going to be the written word. It's going to be describing something. For others, it's going to be, that's probably going to be the most common one. And just from your own brain and your own, that is, talk through what you're trying to do and just start putting, and then start iterating on those. and try as far down the road as possible with that. You say, now let's open up the internet and like, let's look at some other work. And I think if you start that way, that is like the most practical, like slow is fast, fast is slow. It's going to feel like, especially if you're not strong, you can't really sketch very well. Like that's not like your home illustrator. It's going to feel like, why am I doing this when I can literally open up make it look so much better in 5 minutes? It's going to feel like you're wasting your time, but you're actually getting farther down the road because you're forming that design muscle that is going to serve you through the rest of the process. That's what I'd say.
Ditto.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, people are going to want to find your work. Where will people find you online?
Yeah, we have the longest website URL in Canada. It is wearecolorsandshapes.com.
Colors spelled the non-American way.
With that U, yeah.
Yeah. And then our Instagram, you just look up Colors and Shapes on there. We're in the process of rebuilding our website right now, so we'll be launching that in the next couple of months. But yeah, we're on the interwebs.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks so much, Gordie, Anthony. Thanks so much for your time today and your inspiration for people to keep pressing in to their best creativity, because it doesn't cost much, but it does take the time and the commitment to do it. So thanks so much, guys.
You bet.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Well, thanks so much, Gordie and Anthony, for that conversation. You can check out more of their work and get in touch with them. Maybe you have an upcoming project you'd like to see if they could collaborate with you on. So the link for Colors and Shapes is in the show notes below. Next week, episode 3, we have author and podcaster Emily P. Freeman. Amongst writing many best-selling books, Emily hosts the Next Right Thing podcast. It has over 2.5 million downloads, so I'm guessing a ton of you who listen to Word Made Digital have maybe listened to some of her work. If you haven't read some of her books, you've maybe listened to her podcast, Next Right Thing. So we're going to be talking with Emily about creative writing, getting published, how to get published, and also talking about figuring out what the next right thing is in your own life. So a final thanks to our sponsor for Season 2, Wycliffe College. Remember, they offer flexible theological education. So whether that's in class or online, full-time, part-time, whatever suits your needs, your schedule, they have something for you. And you can read all about how Wycliffe helped me in my spiritual formation on their site. They made a special interview page just for me and you guys where we can go and kind of engage with the content of Wycliffe College, and you can explore more from there. So wycliffecollege.ca/wordmadedigital. The link is in the show notes. All right, that's all for now. See you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Word Made Digital podcast with Joanna LaFleur. If you like this content, hit subscribe and share this episode with your friends. Head over to joannalafleur.com for more free tools, interviews, and media for creatives and communicators. We'd love to help you be the best you can be at communicating the best news in the world.